All right, the National Minimum Wage Commission has promised an increase of CPI plus 1%. It essentially means that from next year, the new minimum wage will be 23 Rand per hour instead of 21 Rand 69 cents. What does Cosatu make of all of this? Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks joining us. Hello to you, Matthew. Always good to have your views on what's happening with minimum wage and labour in the country. So good news or bad news, according to Cosatu, this increase?
We think it's excellent news. This is really going to help uplift millions of workers. It's already benefited about 6 million of the most poorly paid, impoverished workers in the retail sector, farm workers, domestic workers, workers in the construction, hospitality, cleaning sector, security guards. So it really is quite positive news. It's basically a CPI, and CPI currently is about 5% plus 1%. So in effect, it would be a 6% increase. So that's very positive when we're in the midst of the deepest recession in 100 years. But also another positive aspect to it is that domestic workers would be equalized with the minimum wage from next year. So that means domestic workers would get an increase of about 17% because they're currently pegged at 88% of the minimum wage. So we're going to equalize domestic workers, which is going to benefit about 900,000, mostly women, very poorly paid. So for us, it's quite positive news. This comes in the back that of this year, we managed to equalize farm workers as well, who had been pegged at 90% of the minimum wage. So for us as Cosatu, we're quite pleased by these recommendations. We support it. And I think we're urging the Minimum Wage Commission, the Minister of Employment and Labour and the Department to make sure it does come into effect from the 1st of March next year.
What sort of opposition do you see to this proposal? Because right now it's not set in stone, it's not cast, it's merely a proposal. Generally, what, in your experience, Mr. Parks, do you see as a stumbling block?
Sure. Look, I think we've been quite pleased that most of the submissions to the Commission so far from business and from employers has been in support of such an increase. This recommendation for the Minimum Wage Commission includes the support of organised labour, that Commission, government, but also critically organised business as well. So I think for us, having that consensus support is quite positive. Look, to be honest, to be realistic, there is no law in South Africa or any other country which always has full compliance. There will always be some persons who choose to ignore the law. But what we've seen since 2019, when the minimum wage came into effect, is that most employers have embraced it, most have abided by it, and over the last 3 years, fewer and fewer workers have been denied it. So I think for us, it's quite a positive change around, and this is what we always expected. We also have seen many employers actually seeking to pay better than the minimum wage, such as in the retail sector, where they start to actually increase what they pay their workers, which is also what we have sought to achieve, to push wages from the bottom up to benefit workers.
I imagine there will be businesses, though, busy watching you and I speak this morning, saying, I can't afford as much as they might want to, Matthew. They might want to pay the new minimum wage, but some companies already are struggling at the moment. They might have an issue in trying to pay the new minimum wage. What do we do in that situation? Not a case of them not wanting to. They might not be in a position to do it. What do we tell them?
Sure, the Minimum Wage Act provides for such situations. Such employers who can't legitimately afford to pay for it, through no fault of their own, because of the economy, etc., they can apply to the Department of Labour for an exemption. All they would need to do is to submit some of their financial statements to say, yes, indeed, I cannot afford it, and they will be given an exemption. They would need to engage with their workers, with their unions at the workplace, naturally, but we have had a few thousand employers over the past few years apply for exemptions, and when there were legitimate cases they generally couldn't afford it, they were given such exemptions. And the approach has always been to assist employers who are struggling, and that's why for the past 3 years we had pegged farm workers at 90%, we had pegged domestic workers at 75% and later 88%, to kind of ease the most vulnerable, the most fragile sectors of the economy, because we really want to avoid retrenchments, and it's really about giving space where it legitimately is needed to those struggling employers too.
Let's talk about the broader economy of this, though. We unpacked how smaller businesses can get exemptions and make sure that they can pay minimum wage. Can the economy handle this, though? Surely we're going to see some kickback from big business saying that this is an awful amount of money. Economists are going to say, yes, well, it's a good thing. Where's the money going to come from? We're in a retraction as far as the economy is concerned.
Sure. Look, before the minimum wage came into effect, the economy was already limping. It's been limping for many years. But with the research which has been done for the Commission by the University of Cape Town, has shown that actually there's been very, very few job losses as a result of minimum wage. The job losses I think we experience is because of load shedding, because of ESCOM, because of corruption, because of COVID-19. There were some job losses, for example, for domestic workers, but those have largely been recovered as the economy reopens. And so I think that's why we've taken a very kind of cautious approach to the minimum wage. That's why we've given exemptions for the past 3 years. That's why we provided for exemptions as well, to try to ease that. But I think for us as Cosatu, really what you're getting to is critical. How do we grow the economy? How do we reduce unemployment? And for us, the critical things is let's fix ESCOM so we have reliable and affordable electricity. Let's fix prices so workers can get to work on time, so companies can be productive. We must fix Transnet so that our exports can get to the markets on time. We have to fix corruption and so forth. We have to also, equally, all of us vaccinate. So for us, those are the fundamental blockages to economic growth, to job creation. If we can deal with those things, then I think these issues of unemployment and poverty can be dealt with quite decisively.
Last question to you, Mr. Parks, before I let you go. If it wasn't for, as you mentioned, the corruption in the country and also issues with ESCOM, how much more money do you think you could get for minimum wage workers in this country? Surely you would have done the math somewhere. I imagine, not knowing the stats, you'd be able to get a lot more money for minimum workers. But we're dealing with, as you say, corruption and ESCOM.
No, definitely. I mean, we'll be far ahead. And to be honest with you, South Africa should not be where it is today. We should be, we're 27 years into democracy, we should have been approaching the levels of South Korea, given our industrial base, our levels of skills, education, our infrastructure, the diversity of the economy. We have no excuse. But I think, to be honest, as we all know, we've squandered a decade because of corruption and state capture. It will take us the next few years to rebuild the pieces, but we have to do it. What we cannot afford is to continue to dither, to have an unemployment rate of 46%, to see state-owned enterprises, municipalities bleeding. So there's going to be a lot of hard work for us. There is some green shoots we've seen around tackling corruption, around rebuilding ESCOM, but much more needs to be done and much quicker, to be honest.
This could be one of those green shoots again, and hopefully it could be a Christmas present which we get in March of next year if the National Minimum Wage Commission's proposal of an increase of CPI plus 1% is agreed upon and put into place. Mr. Matthew Parks, always good to have you with us on eNCA. Cosatu Parliamentary Coordinator joining us here on the South African Morning.